Again, thanks so much for coming. This is my home group for sure, and I really appreciate being able to connect with everybody. A lot of you have heard about Loving Heart Connections before, thanks to Wendy and Karen. And so I wanted to just give you kind of an update a little bit and give you just a very, very brief overview of what Loving Heart Connections is all about. And then I've asked some participants of Loving Heart Connections to join us today and to talk about their experiences a little bit. And I don't want this to be an advertisement about Loving Heart Connections. I want it to be information that will be able to be helpful to this group. And so if you want more information about Loving Heart Connections, you can email me at janebissler@gmail.com, or you can go to my website at clearingyoursoul.com. But at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just give you just a little bit of some background information about Loving Heart Connections. And what's interesting is that it has decided to disappear. You know, there's always something, right, that goes wrong or isn't exactly what we want to have happen. So I have it back up again. And so perfect. Okay, great. And so I'm assuming you can all see my shared screen. So this is all about Loving Heart Connections. I certainly welcome you to know about it. The reason why Loving Heart Connections actually came about is because of this information. This is research that has been done since 1997 about the people who have complicated grief, or what we as clinicians would talk about with complicated grief. In my clinical years of working mostly with bereaved parents and also other bereaved, I found that almost everybody that was coming in to see me as a clinician had some kind of complicated grief. And so the professionals, researchers, we're really looking for a very specific criterion about complicated grief. And so we know that there's a higher risk for suicide, there's some social and occupational impairment, there's some physical health problems and other mental health problems as well. The one thing that we know is that having continuing bonds is something that's very helpful with complicated grief, and it really helps for that person to stay connected with their deceased loved ones. And so Silverman and Nickman did a lot of study about transforming that relationship. And it really does need to be a different relationship. Those of you who are bereaved certainly know that it can't be exactly the same as it was before. So continuing bonds take lots of different perspectives. But there's an active sense of the presence, not just memories that you've had of things that you've had before. Experiencing the person in all 5 of your senses. You're looking at the continuation of that person in your active thoughts. And also, this is by Klaas and Steffen, who have written a wonderful book, in 2018, that's really looking at a conscious incorporation of the characteristics or virtues of the dead into the self. So that's kind of a wordy definition for continuing bonds, but I think it's one that's extremely beneficial for us to be thinking about. This also came from Silverman and Klaas, but it's a way to resolve the grief process, not the relationship. We don't want to resolve the relationship. We want to strengthen the relationship and allow it to transform into something else that would be very helpful for us. When grievers discuss their continuing bonds through after-death communication, or ADCs, That work with experienced counselors, 75% of the grievers felt invalidated. And so this was a real spur for me to be able to continue teaching at Kent State University, and also working with ADEC, Association of Death Education and Counseling, to help counselors understand that this is a phenomenon that is very normal and extremely beneficial and helpful. So the Loving Heart Connections technique uses an element from eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So EMDR is a very long and complicated protocol, but the one aspect that we use for Loving Heart Connections is the bilateral stimulation. And this is done through tapping and sounds and eye movements, all three together. And it's a wonderful protocol just for people to be able to relax. I've used it in the dentist office. I've used it at other times. And it's not the whole tapping process that we can also go through that's been pretty well researched. But this bilateral stimulation is just a tiny piece of it. It's also designed, to provide spiritual connections between the client and their deceased loved ones. And I've expanded it now to also include guides and or the higher self, because what I have found is that there are a lot of people who are not bereaved, critically bereaved, and they would like to have some information from their guides. And this protocol has worked really well in helping people connect with their spiritual guides as well. I do it all electronically, and the platform that I'm using currently is Zoom. And the length of sessions are up to 120 minutes, but let's be honest, they're rarely less than 120 minutes. But you know that there are lots of different kinds of assisted connections, and Wendy and Karen have done a great job in really kind of showing us and showcasing those different kinds of assisted communications. Those are through mediums and psychics, intuitives, and then other self-guided afterlife connections as well. So then we're talking about another category that's induced. So these are things that we're actually making to happen. Again, through bilateral stimulation from EMDR, through IADCs, induced after-death communication, and Craig can tell us a lot about that. Also, the grief therapy, repair and reattachment therapy, which Craig can also tell us a lot about, and then Loving Heart Connections. So our clients, my clients that are using Loving Heart Connections, are also often experiencing these afterlife communications. And those communications can be a feeling, can be pictures that they're seeing, different colors, sounds, and even pressure on the body. I have found that it's physical, emotional, and spiritual, and that really most of my clients are feeling like they're between two worlds, and that is a statement that many people have found, is that it feels like I'm between two different environments. Some of my clients have had very intense emotions, but how could you not? Is that especially the first time that you're really connecting with your loved one. And what we find is that Spirit has really made sure that whatever's needed by the client at that time is actually given to them. It's also been referred to as out-of-body experiences, and people who have done shamanic journeys relate it very closely with what they have been able to do through shamanic journeying, but better, quote unquote. They are seeing meaningful symbols and also having multiple connections. And one of our experiencers will be talking about those multiple connections. So the connection is really, this whole protocol is really designed to help that client feel physically, emotionally, spiritual, and also to receive healing. And what that's been kind of a surprise to me is that we've had some people who have had physical healings from this protocol, and that has been kind of shocking. I expected the emotional healing to come because it's really kind of underscoring that lovely connection, and relationship. But I was very surprised at the physical. I don't use any kind of special equipment. We don't need training for shamanic journeying. We don't have to travel to any particular center. It's not the expense or the time commitment of EMDR or some mediums, psychics, and intuitives. You have the ability to do this in your own home, and you can repeat this modality numerous times. I have some people who are doing it every day. I have some people who are doing it once a week, because you have all of the information you need at the end of your 120 minutes with me, your 2 hours with me, to be able to replicate this in your own home. And that was an absolute necessity when I designed this, is that I wanted people to be able to have the control to do this when they felt it was right for them. And so here's my email and my website, and I'll leave that up for just a moment if you need to get that information, or I can put it in the chat window later for you. But I'm certainly available to answer any questions that you might have. And on the Clearing Your Soul website, there's also a testimonial page that's very helpful, I think, for people who are trying to decide whether or not this is something they want to do. So at this point in time, I'm going to stop the share on this and come back to you. The computer is trying to be a little funky. There we go. And trying to come back to you a little bit and just kind of pose some questions. So those of you who have experienced this that would like to share, and there's some people on here that don't want to share that have experienced that, and that's perfectly okay as well. But I will ask you to use the reaction button as I kind of pose some of these questions. There's a reaction button if you're on a Mac at the bottom, and there's a point there that will let you raise your hand, and that way I'll know which question or if you have something you'd like to add to us. So when I had our kids, we used Lamaze, right? Some of you may recognize that, and had our 2 daughters without any medication and used the Lamaze training, and it was wonderful. And it was a way to relax yourself and your body through that. And bilateral stimulation, it's very close to Lamaze, but without the breathing, you're actually doing the tapping. So it's an age-old concept, right? Using this, and one of the keys to loving heart connection, 2 keys really. One is relaxation, and one is trust. And I think maybe some of the mediums that you've had on, Wendy, would agree that that's part of their protocol too, is relaxation and trusting what it is that they're actually receiving. And so in this way, you know, it just kind of provides a new way to do that. When the bilateral stimulation, I use a metronome, an electronic metronome, but I do have people close their eyes because they are in the comfort of their own home. And what I find is that if they happen to be sitting in their office and their eyes are open as they're following left and right with the beats of the metronome, they'll see things like, oh, I forgot to put that file away, or, oh, there's a book I meant to return to the library. Oh, I need to do this. Oh, I need a shopping center, blah, blah, blah. So by keeping their eyes closed and listening to the metronome and shifting their attention to the right while tapping on their right leg, and shifting their attention to the left while tapping on their left leg, kind of takes away some of that distraction. So if you use a metronome, an electronic metronome that's free, and anybody can download from the App Store with this. Again, that's part of the promise to my clients that they can do this on their own if they would like to do that. Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so thank you, Jane, for that great presentation. And you actually posted on your Facebook these questions, so I can make it brief and actually hit, the content. So, why did I seek to personally connect with a loved one? Because I was going through extreme grief. I mean, my husband was in a tragic, horrific accident out of state. So even though I got the best grief counselors, that really didn't help. It affected me physically and emotionally. Immediately, my daughter had set me up to see a medium, and fortunately, our connection, my husband came through right away. In fact, he came with my dad, who's also up there with him. So there's evidence, but when you see a medium, you get that high and you feel like, all right, it's all good. The evidence is there. But then after a few days, you're like, well, I don't know. And I'm starting to doubt things. So, and then I think that in the mediums that I have seen, which are only two that were very evidential that my husband likes to participate in the reading, they, I want to say, they always encourage afterwards to you can make the connection, but you have to really, work on it both sides, because they're learning something and you're also learning how to communicate differently. So you don't have to be a medium, was pretty much what they often will say. And then, what do you know now to be true about the afterlife that you didn't know before? That the two initial readings that I had was very shocking, because it was something that my husband had kept for many, many years, and I didn't find out till after he passed, and then I validated it with my mother-in-law, and it was the truth. So that made me believe, like, oh no, he knows what's going on. He is the same, and it's also in real time. So after I had my session with Jane, I had to, I had to practice. Like, I'm a very high strung person. I work in the medical field. There's so much like energy, dense energy. So the bilateral eye movements, the tapping, that really helps me to get relaxed and to get ready to prepare to whatever happens and comes. I always default to my husband, but I'm always open to anyone who shows up. So I think that's very relaxing. And when I did the connection, I was just amazed. And Jane used the two key words, which is trust and relaxation. Trust is the big one. Like, is this really me, or is this my mind? Because I wish it so much to communicate with you, but no, because there was evidence during the session that he showed up in a suit that he wore. I think it was at the viewing or something, and he was showing me different places in the house. He was very strong. His spirit was strong, and I was like, oh wow, I feel like a medium for a minute. I don't have any intentions to be a medium, but I was like, this is great. He showed me images. I saw words. I saw scenes around the house, scenes of a road trip we were on. So that was really great. And so I think, I can't imagine whether it's your partner, your child, or anyone, like how very helpful this is. And I still continue to do it. I just have to really get in a relaxed state for me. I have to trust it for sure. And I try to do it, of course, on the days that I'm not working. So that has been my experience. And I think it's another tool, and it's very, very helpful. It has helped push through the grief, knowing that we can make our own communication without anyone in between. Thank you,
Great.
Jane.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, I did post it on the website. We have a private Facebook group that is just for people who have experienced the modality. So I did post some questions on there just to see if anybody was interested in contributing information. So that's what Doris kind of ratted me out about that a little bit. But thank you, Doris. I appreciate that. Annie, would you like to kind of take a shot at kind of letting us know what your experience was like?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I had a session with Jane last Thursday, September the 16th. I was told about Jane, went to her website, and I thought, I'm going to give this a try. And just from the first time I emailed her, just the way she was and how kind she was. We had our session and we got together, and it was so relaxing. It was to the point where I was almost like I wasn't in my living room. William did come through. He showed us some things in heaven, and he talked about how he liked it, and it was, I can't even describe how I felt. I can't describe the things he showed me.
One of the things you talked about, Annie, I don't mean to interrupt you, I just wanted to be helpful a little bit. One of the things that you talked about were the colors that you saw that you have a name for, but they don't look like the colors here.
Yes. When I saw William, one of the things that he showed me was he showed me this flower, and it was this pink flower, and it was so it was like the flower was alive. The color was it just wasn't like a pink that's here, and it was like the flower was almost breathing.
Wow.
And the flower was he was outside, and the green is just a green that is just not in the world. It's just this green, and there was, I guess, like a pond or a kind of a lake, and you could see lily pads and these flowers, and William said he said lotus, and I never would have known the flower was a lotus. And he said lotus land, and after the reading I googled lotus land, and it says a place where people need only think about enjoying themselves, not about work or achieving anything. And I thought that was really amazing for him to show that. And then at one point there were these colors that came up, and it was Aurora Borealis. And I don't know if anybody's ever experienced Aurora Borealis, but I live in Canada and I have. And it wasn't, and when you see it in real life, it's magical. But this was beyond magical. It was like I was in the colors. It was just, I just can't explain it. And then again, I looked up Aurora Borealis, and it says the Cree Indians held that the aurora was part of life's circle and were the spirits of the dead who remained in the sky but apart from their loved ones. The Cree believed that the lights were spirits of these departed friends and relatives trying to communicate with those they had left behind on earth.
Oh, beautiful, Annie. Some of the things that Annie talked about are specifics that I see across sessions. One of them is not being able to really quantify or qualify the colors, the scenes, the flowers, the trees, the other kinds of things that they see when they're in that place. Between two worlds or out of body are things that people talk about with this. Not having the words for what it is that their feelings are. I try to ask everybody to ask a question that they may not, that they certainly don't know the answer for, just as kind of an evaluation of what's really happening. And that's one of the things that came up with Hershey, asking William whether or not Hershey was able to see him. Every dog is not like Lily, so that's what I have to say. Every dog is not a medium like Lily Pearl is. But Annie, thank you so much. Des, would you talk to us about Des is really wanted to connect with her spiritual guidance. And so we use the protocol for her to be able to do that, specifically to speak to her spiritual guidance. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, Des?
I sure can. You're going to hear my bulldog snoring in the background, but they like to be where the energy is. I've had multiple sessions with Dr. Bissler. The first one was to connect with my family members, and very easily my dad came through, both of my grandmothers, my grandfather, and 2 aunts. So it was like a family reunion. How did I feel? Intense joy, I guess, would be the only emotion that I could attach to that. Also, I was called to use it after those sessions, and also another session with Dr. Bissler when I was facilitating for a client. And so I call it setting the tempo almost. So I started the session using the Loving Heart Connections modality, and it almost clears the communication grids between my guidance and me. And not only with my guidance, but also for this particular client, the first time that I used it, the whole way that I worked was different. I work with chart-based systems. I wasn't using the charts. And in addition, her family members that were in spirit came through quite easily. And I do believe it's because the Loving Heart Connections modality set that up, strengthen that communication grid. And also, as Sherry said, our minds get in the way. So when I felt like I was being pulled in another direction, thinking about this, that, or the other thing, sometimes that happens, I would simply just close my eyes, use the eyes. If I felt to tap, I would tap, and I would let my guidance lead me in that way. But that's how it strengthened my relationship with my guidance, and also with my family members, and it's a beautiful modality. I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to strengthen that connection with your personal guidance, your guidance. If you work with clients and you work with their guidance to have that, all of the communication, all those grids cleared out, that's what I feel. It feels stronger, reinforced, if that makes sense.
Thanks.
I hope
Yes.
that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you, Des. I appreciate it. So one of the things that I was so happy last Sunday when Wendy was talking about, wondering whether Spirit was kind of looking at these direct personal communication modalities, and maybe looking at those in a stronger way, perhaps, than even mediumship. And that's what this is. It's a direct personal communication modality. As I showed you on some of the slides, there are others. Loving Heart Connections is just one of them. I think it's the best, but I'm a little prejudiced. And there are wonderful things out there. I think the big thing is looking at people who are grieving and people who are struggling in any way, and being able to give them the ability to make these connections is our responsibility. If we know that this is available to them and this is going to make their life healthier and this is going to make their life happier, then we have a responsibility to be able to share what it is that we know so that other people can get the most out of this life experience as they possibly can. Okay, great. Does anybody have a question that might be helpful for the group? Janice.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if there's a way that you set it up before you start in terms of clearing the space of any kind of unwanted energies or any interfering energies throughout the whole thing so that you're surrounded by love and light and getting the truth.
That is a fantastic question. Thank you, Janice. I really appreciate you asking it. I am a big believer in intention. And so I kind of live my life in an intention way. And so, yes, I will take the time before each session to make sure that the intention is pure. And I'm also intending and connecting with my own spiritual guidance to make sure that that information that comes through is to the very highest and best for the person that I'm working with. So yeah, great question. I appreciate you bringing that about.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure. Any other questions?
I have a quick one. The Zoom group that you're talking about where we practice the eye movements type of thing that you run?
It's not a group, Nicole. It's actually individual sessions that I'm doing. I'm actually doing a training the first weekend in November for licensed practitioners. It can be all kinds of different licenses. I have a psychologist, a couple of RNs that are going to take the class, an acupuncturist, a couple of DOs, and an MD.
Reiki qualify?
Reiki does not qualify for this one, but I'm going to do a paraprofessional session, a training session further down the calendar. And I can sure let you know about that. And if you'd like to put your email address in the chat, if you'd like to be connected with that list, then I can send it out to you, let you know when that training is actually going to happen. But this one, the first weekend in November, is just for professionals. But thanks so much for asking. That's a great question.
I wanted to know, how does your modality differ? How is it, say, better than the average practitioner who does this?
So I would tell you that the difference between Loving Heart Connections and induced after-death communication is that with induced after-death communication, you're taking the person, the client, to that brink of grief, right? And you're having them feel all the emotions that they possibly can. I have found that that's not necessary to have the person establish that connection. I have found that clients can sometimes get kind of lost in that incredible emotional time. And so I have found that a better idea through that kind of last part of that. I have 3 segments to mine. So the third segment is you being able to kind of put yourself into the place where you would have connected with your wife the most. It might be on a swing in the backyard. It could be on your couch in your living room or at the kitchen table or while you're driving the car, whatever it would be. And have you go there because that's a comfortable place for you. And the more comfortable you are, the easier that's going to be for them to be able to actually come through and meet with you. And then for you to be letting them approach you. I am a big one. I'm a stickler, and the people that are here can tell you if they're saying, well, it could be, I went, nope, stop. We don't do it could be. It either is or it isn't. Because I don't want to ever plant ideas in anybody's mind or have them leave and then start questioning about, like Doris talked about with a medium. Was it that way or wasn't it that way? When it's coming in through your own heart mind, right? You know what it feels like. You have the picture, you have the smells, you have the pressure on the body, you know, and that's the litmus test. I can't promise you. Craig Hogan made a really good statement. Well, he's always making good statements. Sorry about that, Craig. But he made a really good statement a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a little bit longer. But he said, not everyone has the ability to connect. And he wasn't talking about those of us in body. He was talking about those who are not in body. And so I think that although that hasn't really been my experience, I think it's certainly possible. And if Craig said it, bow to the master, I definitely agree with it. But I think that there are other ways for them to communicate. There are ways for them to communicate by feeling a pressure. I worked with a woman this past week and in the UK, and she didn't see her mom, but she felt her mom's presence. And so, was her mom connecting with her verbally? No. Did she connect with her in pictures the way William did with Annie? No. But this client was very, very sure that her mom was there because she felt that pressure. So while I can't guarantee it, I will tell you that we could sure give it the good old college try. And I would continue to work with you until we make something happen. But again, your job would be to relax, and your job would be to trust. Because when they know, I think this is accurate, when they know that you don't trust it, they have a more difficult time actually kind of coming through and presenting that to you. Right.
I'm a little curious. I've been to 2 psychics. I've also experienced a lot of ADCs, which I learned to recognize through a book called Hello from Heaven. And this sounds very interesting. Now, does a facilitator, or whatever you like to call yourself, do you experience anything regarding what the client is experiencing?
You are opening a can of worms here, Anne. So I have a little bit of ability to kind of make connections as well. And so oftentimes they'll give me questions to have the person ask. But as far as experiencing what the client is specifically experiencing, I don't, but I am oftentimes in connection with the person that they're trying to connect with.
Yeah, okay.
And I've been found out a few times, but I try to deny that.
I was just curious as to, I mean, in other words, your method is actually really eliminating the need for a psychic or another person, because the person becomes their own psychic, really.
Right, that's exactly right. That's exactly right, Anne. The person becomes their own medium. Yep, exactly. That's fair. That's very, very true. Yeah.
Does it ever come up that, I don't want to create a big story, but say, for example, you've had a past life with someone, okay, and that person passes away, and you're really, really feeling it. Maybe you're feeling it more, even more profoundly than what you would expect. Does it ever come up, anything to do with past lives, either, our own past life or somebody else's past life?
Yeah, so I'll just tell you a real quick story. And that is, I worked with a woman whose son had crossed, and she was very, very interested in meeting with him. And I often tell people, and Linda Hahn can tell us a story about this as well, but don't make up your mind who is actually going to be there. Be open for whoever might actually be there. This woman was seeing picture snapshots of things that she did not recognize. They were black and white photos. They were very quick. They were coming in a very quick succession. When she told me that this is what was going on, she said, I have no idea what this is. And I said, okay, well, that's all right. Let's just, go back into it. So we went back into it. She said, oh, gosh, I was in the Swiss Alps. I don't know what that's about. I said, well, have you ever been in the Swiss Alps? And she said, well, yeah, but, that was like 35 years ago. And I said, okay. And I said, so can you tell me about that time? And she said, oh, yeah. She said, well, my first husband and I were married right out of college, and we traveled all over Europe for 4 months, and then he suddenly died. And I said, so do the snapshots have any meaning for you? And she said, well, now they do. It looks like the villages that we actually lived in. And so her husband, her first husband, who died after 4 months of marriage and died over 35 years ago, came through first. And she was not expecting him. She did not have him on her mind at all because she wanted so desperately to connect with her son. And he actually brought the son through. It was not his father, but he actually brought her son through. So I think that lots of times our guidance will bring in, again, what it is that the client really needs. This woman told me later that she was, going through a very, very tough divorce with her present husband. And now she sees that she wishes that this first husband would have been the father of her son who died, and on and on. So it was very interesting for her, shocking actually, but being open to whatever spirit is going to be bringing in is the key to this. Thank you, Janice, for asking that.
You're welcome.
So before I turn this back to Wendy, I just want to say the 2 words that are most often heard in these sessions are weird and wow. Everybody says, oh my gosh, this is really weird. I don't want to tell you because it's so weird. And everybody says, wow, at some point in time. So I think that's what our afterlife connections really do for us, right? They provide that wow for us.
Thank you, Jane. And thank you so much for your dedication of 35 years in this field, which is not an easy field to work in as a counselor, because when you're an empath, you get to feel everything that your clients feel. And thank you for being such a loving presence in the world. And I think you have developed such an extraordinary advance in grief connection. And what excites me is that you're now able to train other people in it as well, so that we can get this out, roll this out worldwide. It's absolutely fabulous. Can we call Craig on, please, if he's still here? Just because this is your area.
Yeah, Jane, you know how enthusiastic I am about your work, and so I want to encourage you to continue doing that. I'm also ecstatic about the fact that you're going to be training trainers. People need this, and you're making it available, and of course you have the unique talent to be able to do this. As far as being able to connect, it is true that the people on the other side cannot connect very easily because they can't get through to us. But your method, this method, then allows that connection to occur. So that trumps it, it overwhelms it, it takes that away so that they can connect. And so that's what's so exciting about it. This is changing humanity one person at a time.